Hello and welcome to the Situation Report. Glad to have you joining the conversation today. This is the show where we do our very best every single episode to give you the information and perspectives you need to navigate an ever-changing culture. My name is Jeremy Stolnicker. I am your host. And today we are going to talk about culture. We're going to talk about business. We're going to talk about technology. These are all very important issues. We spend a lot of time on this show in particular dealing with culture. And if you're not careful, even as a person of faith, looking at the culture as it is, one can, again, if they're not careful, have a very pessimistic view of the future. It's easy to fall into this place where we want to hang on to what was or drag where we are right now back to what was, and we become very dismissive, very pessimistic of what can be. Instead of building the future that we want, we bemoan and we mourn what is no longer. And today we're going to talk about a different perspective, looking at the economy and looking at technology, the tools available to us, having the right perspective to understand where we are, to be thankful for the past, but not try to hang on to it, and to build into the future. I'm very grateful today to have on a guest who understands this, who has operated in this space for a long time, who is equipping and enabling others to do that as well. My guest today is Nate Fischer. Nate is a founder and investor. He is the CEO of New Founding. You can find him on newfounding.com, and he talks in this interview about what he and his company do, and just such a positive view of the world, not a negative view in the sense that we're naive or we're just going to dismiss what is. It's not that. It's accepting what is, but also accepting that God, the Creator, has a plan and it's bigger than what is, and we can build into the future if only we will. I trust that this conversation will be a help and an encouragement to you today with my guest, Nate Fischer. Nate Fischer, thank you for joining me. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
I have made this as hard as possible for us to get together. I think we rescheduled several times, but appreciate you working with it. And this is such an important conversation. Want to talk technology and so many other things. But let's start with your story. I'd love for you to tell us kind of your story, of course, where you came from, how you grew up, your faith story, and then I want to get in specifically to the work that you're doing, and your take on the economy and your take on how we as Christians should interact with some of these things. But let's start with your story. Tell us kind of where you came from. You're in Dallas now, but haven't always been there, and I'd love to hear your faith story as part of that.
Absolutely. So I grew up in upstate New York. It was sort of on the fringes of the New York metro area, and grew up in I was homeschooled all 12 years of school. So I'm 38 now. So it was the early days of homeschooling. My mom was a pioneer in that, and I mean that was back when we had numbers on the fridge in case the cops would come to take us away because homeschooling was sort of questionable legality. And it was. It was really motivated by two things. We were very serious Christians, and it was motivated by her desire to give us a Christian upbringing. Obviously, can't rely on the public schools. It wasn't, I think, it wasn't sort of as obvious then as it is now, but the seeds were there. But she also really believed in education. She wanted to give us an independent education, a really good education, and believed that and enjoyed teaching and loved teaching. So I would almost say it was sort of a crunchy-ish upbringing style homeschooling. We lived on 6 acres. We had chickens. We spent maybe 3 hours a day in formal schooling, and then would run around the woods a lot of the time. And family was very serious. My dad was an elder. Church was just down the road. I grew up in the Christian Reformed Church, which is sort of in the Dutch Reformed tradition, similar to the Presbyterian. And great. I think great way to grow up. And then went to Calvin College in Michigan, which is sadly, I think a fallen away Christian college. And I was pretty disappointed in aspects of it quickly as I got there. And I've seen it continue in a trajectory that sadly far too many Christian colleges have followed. Went to law school at Harvard. kind of made the decision during that period that I wanted to go into business. I was interested in politics. I was interested in business in both cases. But it became very clear to me in college, actually in a program I did in DC, that politics was a place, at that point, it was a place where a certain type of sort of Mitt Romney ladder climber would climb. And if you had non-consensus opinions, you'd be shunted to the side and really not have a place. And so I just immediately pivoted my mind to business. I figured business, if you have a non-consensus view and you're correct, you can make a lot of money in investing, particularly. Politics, it sounds like you're kind of out. And so went to law school, but with the intent of going into distressed investing. Graduated in 2010, which was actually a great time for distressed investing, and ended up putting off, deferring, and then not going back to a law firm, good New York law firm, partnering with a classmate, and started buying distressed apartments in Florida. And it was really high conviction about a macro thesis that we could buy very, very cheap apartments. The guy I worked with was just a consummate entrepreneur, just incredible hustler. Learned a ton about business from him. I undid a lot of the bad lessons I learned at Harvard, which are kind of the by-the-book way of doing things rather than the way that things actually get done. So real blessing to start my career unlearning the wrong lessons very quickly.
Sure.
We bought about 7,000 apartments. It was really a bet on demographics, continuing on red state demographics. Grew that very quickly. A wild time to start. During that time, it was very successful financially. I got married, met my wife at law school at the Christian Fellowship. She was very active. She was somewhat in the sort of pro-life, pro-family legal space. And that was when I started. I'd always been serious about Christianity. I'd always been very committed. And as that sort of initial trade was maturing, that's when I started thinking a lot about something that was much more, okay, what is a play that intersects with sort of the way I like to think of my faith impacting my work is it's not just values. It's not just I'm going to do something that makes the world a better place, but I look at the world differently. I understand the world differently. I think as Christians, we have a view of the world that understands important realities that the other side misses. And if that's the case, going back to my point about non-consensus but correct opinions, there's going to be opportunities that we see that are very real, very impactful business opportunities that are missed by most people. And that was kind of what I started thinking about is really, I think the main one that I was drawn to consistently, and we can talk more about this throughout the podcast, but I believe that Silicon Valley, and I would believe that in many ways, our dominant elites across business and culture, they have an overly pessimistic view of people. They tend to believe that most people are trending toward obsolescence. People are going to be replaced by AI, et cetera. And as a result, they build businesses and they build technologies that reflect that. And as a Christian, as someone who believes the Genesis 1 account of creation, we're made in the image of God, I have a more optimistic view of people. I believe that betting on people more broadly. Now, obviously, we understand Genesis 3, we understand the fall, but nonetheless, there's something there, and a broader set of bets on people are going to. They're not just good things. They don't just make the world a better place, but they often will offer the key to major business opportunities that other people are missing. And that was really when I started on a path toward leading to what I'm doing now with New Founding. And that was really when I think I would say I gained a very strong and distinctive Christian view of how I was approaching business.
That is super interesting. Let me ask you about the having a positive view of people perspective, because a lot of people who come from particularly the Reformed theology background don't necessarily hold that. In fact, they would say, we are completely broken, completely hopeless. We, without a relationship with God through Christ, have nothing to offer. And I agree with all of that. I think we would agree with all of that. But that can then lend itself to a very negative view of people generally, instead of a positive view of people generally. How do you reconcile that? When you say I have a positive view of people, I'm going to bet on people. How do you reconcile that with with kind of your theology or your view of a fallen man?
So it's a very good question, and I think it's a challenging one. I guess I would probably, it might be more accurate for me to say I have a more optimistic view of people vis-a-vis technology. So
Sure.
on the one hand,
Sure.
I fully recognize that that many people are highly depraved. I
Sure.
think that we have to be realistic about that, and that can actually lead to a recognition of humans' potential for evil, which is, if you combine, in a sense, an optimistic view of human potential, of human capability, with a recognition of fallingness, that leads to, I think, an awareness that we can face real evil. It's actually something Tucker talked about sort of a couple weeks ago that I guess put off the elites at Fox News, it sounds like. But
It put them off for sure.
yes. So it's more that while fallen, we are made in the image of God. And if you think of the Genesis 1 account, the first thing God did in Genesis 1 is he created. And so my view is the creative potential of people, that is something, human judgment, whether it's entrepreneurial judgment, in many ways, in its highest form, a bet on another person. And this is something I've talked a lot about, is finance at its best is not about putting everything in an Excel spreadsheet and reducing it to numbers and coming up with sort of the best IRR or whatever. Finance at its best is an entrepreneurial bet on another person. And that's a creative expression of human judgment, just like a human's creativity as he creates something. Both of those, I think, are following, in many cases, they're following in God's example of creation. We are made in the image of God. And so my view is that is something special, and it's likely something, I won't say it's inherently immaterial necessarily, but it's something that goes beyond what I think a computer or AI is going to achieve. So I'm optimistic that we have real capabilities that are distinctly human, reflect our distinct nature, and are not going to be replaced. Now, whether we use those for good or evil is a separate question, and one that obviously has profound implications.
Right. Man, that's fantastic. I guess it's really settling on the fact or the belief, the understanding that God is sovereign. He hasn't lost control regardless of what's happening in the world, and his creation will respond to the way he created us to respond. I love that perspective because I do believe a depraved heart and a depraved man is very capable of evil. We know that. I don't think we have to convince anyone of that. But I have a hard time with the belief that technology, particularly artificial intelligence and things like that, are going to drag us down a hole that we can't recover from. That this is the end. We need to throw our hands up. We need to walk away, and it's all bad. And looking at it biblically, looking at it with a view of creation in mind is so helpful. How do you do that through your company, through the work that you do at New Founding? So how does that practically then play out?
Well, I'll jump in, and I think what I'll start with is actually jumping on your point about I think, and this sort of shapes our mission overall, is when your view is reduced to conservatism, then technological change, I think, leads to angst and pessimism. In many ways, conservatism, if that's all that we have, is about preserving the good things of the past.
Right.
And there's a great point that's been made that a lot of people assume that sort of conservatives have lost steadily over 75 years because progressives had control of the institutions. But I think there was a contrasting point, which is conservatives have lost because technological change invariably disrupts existing norms. And if your identity is reduced to conserving good things of the past, you are going to see nothing but a steady erosion of those just based on technology. And the problem is the progressives often are the only ones who have a positive, and I mean that in a morally neutral sense, but they have an assertive vision of where we should move toward. This is where, as Christians, I think we have a much better position. Christians are not conservatism is in many ways a sort of a chance to avoid actually tackling the higher questions and coming up with a holistic view of what we should aim for. As Christians, we're comfortable with that. As Christians, we look at Genesis 1, we look at the dominion mandate, and we have a vision of what we should be called to as people, as society, as civilization. And I'm very comfortable saying a technological lever that gives us the ability to get there faster, that gives us the ability to achieve greater dominion toward a
Yeah.
good vision is a good thing. And so new founding at its heart is about organizing people around an alternative positive vision. So much of the movement is reduced to trying to conserve things. My view is people are desperate right now. They recognize that's a losing path. They're looking for an alternative. And our focus is essentially really within the economic domain, really economic, technological, and cultural, but I see those all as sort of what's traditionally seen as private sector. Within the economic domain, there is tremendous opportunity to gain tremendous leverage very quickly, often without a lot of the structural impediments that legacy politics has. And people are hungry. Our motto is build the America you want to live in. People are hungry for the opportunity to join into something where they feel like their day-to-day work can actually work toward building the country they want to live in. And what is that? Well, that means talking about what the positive vision is, what we're actually building toward, not just what we're trying to conserve. So new founding fundamentally does that through two different sides. We have talent placement, again, getting people out of companies where they do not feel like they're able to do that, moving them into whether it's a new startup, whether it's even a co-founder introduction, whether it's a large company that's doing something fairly mundane, but it's doing something real that matters. I mean, if you're in a real business doing something that touches the physical world, I don't think it needs to touch the physical world, but that's usually a strong anchor to keep you from doing anything that's too questionable. People are excited for that. They want to leave companies where they feel like their day-to-day work just doesn't mean anything. It's inundated in bureaucracy, or to the point of actually joining a startup where they're building something that really is potentially game-changing. And then the other side of what we do is venture. And venture for us can range from, again, those co-founder introductions. It's really on a continuum up to working with early-stage companies. We do sort of an accelerator model where we'll help them out, sometimes with cash, sometimes with an equity partnership, where we help amplify them, leveraging our network, leveraging, again, our talent connections, leveraging our sort of vision of what the opportunities are in this space, our understanding of how to market to this emerging market seeking something different. And then all the way up to, you could call it a venture studio, where we're actually a sort of an institutional co-founder of the company. We put together the founding team. We actually launched something.
Yeah.
We launched as a new startup. So it's on a continuum from basically introductions, helping someone move into a new company, all the way up to actually bringing people together, ideas, capital, to build something. And within there, we have a deal room where we also match investors and entrepreneurs. So it's a lot of things. From a product standpoint, it's sort of a lot of things we're touching.
Right.
But from a theme standpoint, I think increasingly they're focused on the theme. And here it's about organizing people around this alternative vision and around shared values, where values matter deeply.
That is such a positive outlook. Man, I mean, you know this, I'm sure, but I think it's very difficult. It's become more difficult to have a positive view of where we live, the moment in history that we currently inhabit. It's become very, very difficult to have a positive view. But when you stop trying to preserve what was, or even not even preserve, pull people back to what was, and change your mind to, we're going to build the America, we're going to build the place that we want to be, that becomes an extremely positive perspective, and then allows you to have a positive action. How do you break down the mindset that many have? I've talked about this before. Growing up in a very conservative home, I served in the United States military, and I was very proud of that. I've always been very proud of America and proud to be an American. And it wasn't until fairly recently that I've had to look around and go, the America that I grew up in is no longer. Even some of the things I remember about growing up aren't true. I spend most of my days trying to hang on to something that's in the past and feeling bad about what my kids are going to have to grow up in the future. But I think that represents a lot of people. How do you break down that, let's stop looking back and start looking forward? How do you turn a mind to get involved in so many of the things you just talked about?
So I think It's tough. In many cases, I would say we largely focus on the people who have already made that turn, and they
Right.
they
Right.
recognize there's no going back. Uh, and then what I can do is I can help provide a positive vision. So if I have to convince the person that it's not about going back, then in my experience, and probably part of this is just this isn't my particular talent. I think there's people who are
Sure.
very good at that.
Sure.
Maybe Tucker's better at that. There's people who I think know how to speak to people in that position and sort of slowly walk them through it. I would say my distinct talent, why I launched New Founding, where I believe our edge is to speak to the people who recognize that they recognize that we're not going back, and they want a hopeful path forward. I mean, there's a lot of black pills out there. There's a lot of people who are, there's a lot of people who can look around. It's not hard to be very pessimistic. My mind, I can't help but go to, here's a solution that's not just a positive solution, but here's how we can win. And I don't think we hear a lot of that. We hear a lot of people, even on the conservative side, even when they do say, let's do something positive, it's at a very small scale. And that's great. I think that's actually how most things get done is you need to get things done at a small scale. You need to execute. But at the same time, I think what we offer that is inspiring to a lot of those people is I can lay out a path to how we can win, how we can turn the country, how we can defeat the left, how we can rebuild a civilization. I don't know if it's exactly the same one. That's not the point. But we're rebuilding something good, and we're going to see really a paradigm shift within society that moves away from what we've seen over the last 75 years.
I feel like a lot of people over the last couple of years have finally awakened to the reality, and I'm talking about Christian people or conservative Christian people, have awakened to the reality that if we are either trying to hang on to the past or content to stay within the system, I think more accurately, that the system is broken and we're not going to be able to continue moving forward. I read a book several years ago, a number of years ago, not several, but a number of years ago, Anti-Fragile. I'm sure you've read it, you're familiar with it, but the
hugely
idea,
influential book for me.
For me, it changed the way I look at everything, from my family to what I'm going to give my time to. And not a Christian author, but principally, you need to be an anti-fragile person. Don't tie yourself or marry yourself so much to the system that if the system breaks, you're broke, right? And that mindset, hopefully, is something that people are starting to get a hold of. Do you feel like there's been a shift? Again, you're working in this space. Has there been a shift in people going, maybe I do need to build. Maybe I do need to move forward instead of letting other people build and just hanging on to what exists here within my company or my community or the system that I'm in?
There's definitely people seeking that, and I would say that's a large share of the people in our talent network are people who they're often very successful. They're in very successful positions, good Wall Street jobs, something like that. But they are looking. They're starting to recognize the fragility, right? You say the wrong word and you can be sort of swatted aside.
Right.
B, I think it's fragile living in a place like New York. I mean, you face a lot higher risk, so they want to get to red states. Yeah. I would say it's part of about making yourself anti-fragile.
Yeah.
It's also about building anti-fragile communities, and I think that's a key thing. So you have a lot of people in the crypto world who are very focused on it at the individual level. Ultimately, there's a great line that I heard recently that we're going to steal, which is the best store of value is a high trust community. And what's interesting about that is even the big mantra of Bitcoin is it's a reliable store of value in a fragile world. But in many ways, even any assets can be taxed, they can be regulated.
Right.
A high trust community is something that trust is intangible, and this is really what we're focused on. Is I would say that I'm very glad for the crypto space, and I think it's necessary. Bitcoin is incredibly powerful as a alternative foundation that is not non-hostile. It's not controlled by hostile people. But ultimately, where I see the opportunity and my focus is on the trust-based side of that, which is really how do we build new networks, new economic connections that can offer you the opportunity that can only come through trust-based connections, Because ultimately, yes, you can try to be a sovereign individual, but if you have to put down 110% collateral for everything and all that,
Yeah.
opportunities are going to be constrained. Whereas a high trust community, trust-based opportunities almost always offer more upside opportunity than the others. And so my view is, how do we help build the connections that allow you to align with others where that community is going to be high trust and that community is going to be aligned, and it's going to be anti-fragile as a group, because that trust is very difficult to attack in a way that that a lot of even tangible things can be attacked. And I think people are looking for that. I think there's a lot of we're seeing a collapse in trust in institutions, and this is I think this going back to my point of how do we win. The analog I like to use is the Quakers in 17th century England were sort of a famously high trust community. Barclays Bank came out of there. They were seen as trustworthy people to do business with, obviously within their community, but also outside of it. And the fact that outsiders are drawn to that shows that if we can build high trust networks, I think often within Christian communities, often around maybe independent influencers. I think and I use influencer in a very positive word, positive sense. Like if you are able to influence people in a world where people really don't trust most people or institutions, that is a very scarce resource, actually. That shows a level of trust and influence. And if we can build essentially economic layers and economic networks around high trust, high social capital communities, whether it's communities or followings, those are anchored to something that's independent of the regime overall. And as trust in institutions more broadly collapses, that sets us up as something that's going to be standing there, and people are going to sort of like after a banking collapse, you have a financial crisis. You have people sort of desperately seeking. They don't want to keep operating at a low level of leverage, a low level of trust. They want to be reorganized and recohere around anything stable. Like Berkshire Hathaway would be there standing, and they would buy up a lot of distressed things. That's what we did in 2011. Similarly, if we can build communities that remain those pillars of trust as broader institutions collapse, you're going to have a lot more people, even outside our community, who want to come to us, and we then can be the anchor institutions. We can create the anchor institutions that organize society. So I think that ability to survive, but actually survive in a way that is sort of poised for more, is what makes us anti-fragile. So we'll actually do well in that collapse.
That's fantastic, and be a blessing to the world that we live in, which is what an incredible opportunity when we look at how fragile the world is, how broken things are, to think that if we'll align to God's design and God's created purpose, then we really can be that testimony, which is what an amazing opportunity. And we don't always look at it that way, but it really is. How do we think about technology? This is an area that I think Christians have been very slow to adopt historically. In fact, I use we, collectively have kind of taken a we'll wait and see, or the internet's bad because all that's there is pornography. Like we always kind of go to that side of technology. We always have. I think we've worked through a lot of that. We're behind. We don't control many of those levers because we waited so long to get involved. And now AI, artificial intelligence, another tool that we can use, is being presented. And the same thing, a lot of Christians are saying this is either very bad, it's going to be bad, or let's wait and see. How should we think about new technologies or emerging technologies like AI right now?
So I think it's interesting. And I would say the Christian reluctance to use technology is probably relatively new. I mean, if you think of the Protestant Reformation, that made liberal use of the printing press and amplified by the printing press. So I don't know I don't know the history well enough to say this with absolute confidence, but my suspicion is as Christianity became tied and identified with conservatism, conservatives have always been suspicious of technology.
Interesting.
And that leads us to that concern about it. It's an interesting question because I think that there's technology. I mean, Thiel had a comment several years ago where he said something like, crypto is libertarian and AI is communist. And so I think technology itself can tend toward different ends. So it's not, I think Christians can be right that certain technologies we should be skeptical of. I don't necessarily agree with Teal's point exactly there, but I think that you can build technology that is conducive toward one particular view or another particular view. And in many ways, I think Silicon Valley, because of their pessimistic view of people, has been attempting to build technology that replaces people. Time and again, their goal is to replace people rather than empower people. And the example I use is a piece of there's technology that does what you want it to do. Simplest is the hammer. The hammer is a lever that makes you more productive. The hammer does exactly what you want it to do and nothing else. So it empowers you. And I would say a piece of digital technology that does the same thing is Microsoft Excel. Microsoft Excel is something you can go there, you can tinker with, you can do what you want with. It does what you want. I think an example at the other extreme is something like Uber, where you have a few engineers writing some algorithms that can manage 2 million people, and they basically just fill in the gaps in the technology at a sort of bottom level. They're not using any of their real creative output there. I'm not saying that's bad technology, but if that's all you build, you're building technology that is going to tend to, I think, reflect a pessimistic view of people. If you can see, they're not building something that is a bet on these people's ability to create more. And so I think that we should recognize that there are technologies that will tend to centralize power. There's technologies that will tend to distribute power. A handgun, combined with the Second Amendment, is a technology that distributes power. Other types of weapons tend to centralize power. But I don't think we need to be pessimistic. And I'll go to AI as a great example. And I think a lot of people look at AI and, again, concerned, obviously, about those who are wielding it. A lot of people who are most concerned about AI are those who don't like that it takes away. They don't like that it's deeply values-laden. I actually think that in some ways busts apart a myth of liberal neutrality that has pervaded our society. That's sort of been a conceit of our society for the last 75 years. We're these autonomous decision makers. We control things. We don't like that these algorithms are nudging us in this direction or that direction.
Right.
Here's an area where the wokes are actually correct. I think the wokes are correct that society and societal structures actually do nudge you in a lot of directions. You're not this sort of mythical autonomous individual. The fact that they recognize it actually gives them a lot of power because they spend a lot of time trying to control those things that nudge us. I think as Christians, we should recognize, again, we are shaped by the society and the community we live in. AI is just a next generation profound manifestation of that, where the AI, the algorithms that that effectively nudge you toward one restaurant or another, and Yelp determine which restaurants live or die. Yeah. The algorithms that populate the feed of the content you consume, hugely values laden, but there's almost infinite content on the internet. So you need curation, and there's going to be a digital component to that. We should recognize that is a domain that we need to be active in. We need to be catechizing the AI because that AI is not values neutral. Google, when you type in a search result, when you type in a search term, is going to have a number one result. It will have a number two result. There must be a value system by which Google decides the one result is better than the number two result. And my view is that value system should be Christian. It should reflect Christian values. And that is a question of, as one of my colleagues, James Pullo, says, of what religion you catechize the bots with. And the wokes are well aware of this fight. They are actively, AI ethics, as they define it, is about catechizing the bots with woke ethics. We should be catechizing the bots with our ethics.
Yeah, that's good. So this will be my final question. There are a lot of other things that we could talk about, obviously, but when we look at all of these things then, so we're going to have a positive view of the future because we're going to work to build that future. We're going to invest our time, our talents, our treasure, to stick with T's. We're going to invest all of that in building that. We believe in the Dominion mandate. We're going to bet on people because people were created by a sovereign God. but we still operate in a broken world, and even as it relates to technology, and we're going to use technology, we're going to try to catechize technology, but we're using technology often that, again, as you just said, it's been catechized by those who adhere to a different religion. So we're working in this world. We're operating in this world. We want to build. We want to use what is available to us in a positive way and in a good way. How do we personally, as individuals, stay grounded so that we can then use technology, we can use the other tools that this culture affords us, and not be moved by an algorithm that would seek to move us, or be pulled away from the truth by culture? It's very subtle often. How do we personally stay grounded enough to be able to build and move forward?
So I think a huge part of that is this goes to my point about the community. I think as an individual, I actually think that's very difficult. Sort of as an autonomous individual.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Obviously, a good church, most important thing. Staying grounded to the Word of God, reading the Bible, praying, spiritual discipline, your family. Those are all valuable parts of it. I think a community, though, and so the technology, just to give you an example of sort of the way I think of our talent network working, the ideal model is sort of a fractal localism, where if you have an opportunity, let's say you could post a job opportunity to your church, everyone in your church would get it. Well, that's great. Often there's a lot of opportunities where you might do that if there were actually a convenient way of doing that very, very easily. And the mere fact that Google makes it easier to post it to the world or something than it does to, it's easier to go on some sort of universal marketplace than do your own church means you do that. But let's say you could do it to your church and you could do it to 10 adjacent aligned networks. And maybe that includes 5 sort of similar valued churches in the area, maybe some that are very aligned, but they're geographically further away. It depends on if it needs to be aligned. Maybe it's 4 or 5 podcasts and Substacks that are, again, the people who read those are going to be very aligned in core values. They're sort of, it's this concentric circle of aligned communities. The benefit is, yes, you're using digital technology to amplify it, but you're using digital technology to actually make the sort of connections that already are recognized as valuable in real-world human communities. And we're just making it easier. We're not trying to sort of create a fundamentally different type of network or type of connection the way a lot of social media today is, but we're actually trying to take what you do or what you wish you could do and just amplify that and make it easier and more convenient and gain a little bit more scale. I mean, maybe the scale of your church is not enough to make it worthwhile in many cases, but if you could hit 10 adjacent networks, that now gains enough scale that it's actually competitive with going on the global marketplace or whatever. And what that means is, it means you're tied to. There's a benefit to localism that feels like just a feel-good one, but B, you actually have a much richer array of connections with those people, right? If you get a recommendation of a person from an adjacent network, you might be at most 2 degrees away from that person and be able to get a pretty strong, who you trust, who knows that person, and that person's judgment is trusted. And then you're not really relying on a bot whose values you're not sure about. But even beyond that, that person is now able to do more and provide something higher. So it's not just about values, but they can make an entrepreneurial human judgment on the other person. When you think of the best bets, when you think of what could beat a Harvard degree, it's a recommendation from someone whose judgment you trust.
That's good.
Time and time again, even the best of our existing, increasingly corrupted, but even the sort of highest of our existing credential system, the best recommendation of a restaurant in Yelp or Google or whatever doesn't compete with the recommendation of someone whose judgment you trust. Right. And again, I think that's the Achilles heel of the Silicon Valley tech giants. They don't believe in people. They try to replace them with technology. So they build technology that tries to replace people, and it's just not that good. And if we can find a way to instead amplify the judgment of people who are recognized as credible, who are recognized as having that ability to make a bet on people, it's not just something that's more values aligned with us. It's not just something that I like dealing with those people more. It's something that is widely recognized as producing better, more powerful outputs. So my view is that not only does that sort of adjacent community model, not only does it keeps you more grounded, it keeps you more tied to much richer real human connections, it also provides something that is actually going to be more powerful and has the potential to ultimately, that's what can disrupt an Ivy League degree. That's what can disrupt dependence on a system of legacy external credentials, is if we can use technology to make dealing with networks of people we trust more convenient.
Yeah, man, that's fantastic. It's the idea of using technology as a tool instead of replacing people with the technology. Yep. Man, that's great. Nate, where can people follow you, learn more about you, and learn more about your company?
So our company, New Founding, you can go to newfounding.com. You can go there for our talent side as an employer. We have an incredible network of people who have signed up, just incredible talent of people looking to move. You can do that if you're an investor or an entrepreneur and you want to post deals, if you want to get on our list and get access to deals. All of that is at newfounding.com. Another organization which I should mention is AmericanReformer.org, and this is focused on, it's a nonprofit, but it's focused on the church. And I think this positive vision becomes a conversation between the church, between Christians and those who are building. And so I see those as very complementary organizations. Ultimately, American Reformer is working on, we have a journal, we have involvement in a number of evangelical organizations. You go to AmericanReformer.org and think of that a little bit as a Protestant First Things. Really taken off in a lot of the recent discussions around sort of debates around more assertive views of Christianity and in politics and culture. And then finally, you can follow me on Twitter at Nate A. Fischer on Twitter, and that's probably the channel where I'm most active. Talk about a lot of these topics here. Yeah. So would love to stay in touch.
That's great. Nate Fischer, thank you so much. Really, really appreciate it.
Thanks, Jeremy. Take care.
Just when you thought it couldn't get any better, Mike Lindell with MyPillow is launching the MyPillow 2.0. When Mike invented MyPillow, it had everything you could ever want in a pillow. Now, nearly 20 years later, he discovered a new technology that makes it even better. The MyPillow 2.0 has the patented adjustable fill of the original MyPillow, and now with a brand new fabric that is made with a temperature regulating thread. The MyPillow 2.0 is the softest, smoothest, and coolest pillow you'll ever own. For our exclusive listeners, the MyPillow 2.0 is buy one, get one free offer with promo code SITREP. MyPillow 2.0 temperature regulating technology is 100% made in the USA and comes with a 10-year warranty and a 60-day money-back guarantee. Just go to MyPillow.com and click on the radio listener square to buy the one, get one free offer. Enter promo code SITREP or call 800-870-0283 to get your MyPillow 2.0 now. We were not made to live in isolation. Sadly, many of our veterans feel they need to fight their battles alone. This self-isolation has led to the staggering statistic of more than 20 veterans taking their lives every day.
A lot of guys end up drinking, a lot of guys end up losing hope. Some of them will go to the VA and they'll try to get, prescription medications to help with PTSD. They'll get pills for anxiety, they'll get pills because they can't sleep, now they'll get pills for depression. Before they know it, they're taking 12 different medications. And when it's not working out, these guys lose hope, and that's why there's 23 guys a day committing suicide.
The mission of Mighty Oaks is to eradicate the veteran suicide epidemic and help our warriors change their legacies. As a result, we've been able to help over 4,000 veterans and first responders by equipping them with the tools they need to live the lives they were created to live.
Everything they said just kept hitting me in the heart over and over and over again. It's like all the things that I didn't know that I needed to hear. And I opened my heart to God that week, dude, and I've been a different person ever since.
Our faith-based, peer-to-peer approach has one of the highest success rates of any program available today, offering hope and understanding to those who need it most. We provide our programs and resources, including travel, at no cost to our warriors.
I remember talking to a licensed social worker who actually handed me a pamphlet to Mighty Oaks. So I went. And I'm glad I did.
By aligning their lives to biblical principles, these men and women are able to lead their families, their communities, and our nation. Our mission is to serve and restore our nation's warriors and families who have endured hardship through their service to America, and to help them find new life purpose through hope in Christ. It's your generosity that can make a difference in the lives of the men and women who have fought for our country and our freedoms. Now that they're home, don't let them fight alone. Learn more at mightyoaksprograms.org.
Great conversation. Very thankful for Nate's perspective. Go and follow him on Twitter. He is very active on Twitter. He mentioned that. And then go to his website for his company, newfounding.com. This is the way we need to be thinking about the world and about culture. Certainly navigating culture, that's what we talk about. But navigating so we can build, so we can move forward, and that so that we can then really fulfill the purpose that God has placed on us. Please go and check that out. Great conversation. Very thankful for that. Appreciate you watching and or listening. If you're not yet subscribed to the podcast, do that right now. Now is the time to subscribe. Go ahead and do that, and then take some time, go over to our website, thesitrep.org, thesitrep.org. You can find archived shows, an opportunity to sign up for our newsletter so that when new episodes come out, you are automatically delivered that in your website, in your email. And we want to make sure that you're constantly aware of what we're doing, the conversations that we're having, the guests that we have on. So please go and check all of that out. Again, really appreciate it. Look forward to talking to you next time.